On today's episode, we're going to talk about the worst American stereotypes and how much of it is true and how much of it is less true. Hello, Young Lieblings. I'm Madi, science fiction and fantasy author who's been living in southern Germany since 2014. As you can see, I had my booze up here. We are back to drinking raspberry gin. If you are interested in drinking some raspberry gin, support local businesses. I will put a link to my friend's business in the description below. Not an affiliated link. He has absolutely no idea that I'm doing this. But if you like good herby gin, I recommend. Not necessarily the raspberry one. You don't have to go raspberry. He's got normal gin as well. So I'm getting ready to head back to the good old US of A in a couple of weeks. And I thought now would be a fun time to look at American stereotypes. Fellow YouTuber Nalf did a video a while back, which I found fascinating. And I thought would be fun to put my own 2 cents in because I offer a slightly different lens as a proven American. So let's get to this list. Number 1. We're loud. Yeah, but Latinos are louder. Much louder. Like, when I was growing up, I would hang out with my American relatives when I wanted a chill night. Though compared to Europeans, when there isn't a football game on, yeah, Americans are perceived as loud. But you don't know the true meaning of loud until you've been around Latinos. It's not a bad thing. It's just... yeah, it's just different. I think so much of it is just relative. So I guess you have an idea of where this list is going. Number 2, overly patriotic. I have noticed this getting more extreme over the years. It was not this bad when I was younger. And I think it really started getting traction after 9/11. I have been thinking about doing an entire episode unpacking American nationalism. If you're interested, let me know and I will try to make it happen. But I think the long and the short of it is that this aggressive display of patriotism seems to stem from our competitive nature as well as the collective trauma of 9/11. Americans are competitive. We try to make everything a competition. I was in show choir where we made being in a choir a competitive sport. What the hell? And this competitiveness includes showing off how much more you love America than the next person. It's weird. Of course, not all Americans are like this, but a very loud portion of the population is this way, and they're the ones the world notices. Like I said, I could actually talk at length about my take on this subject, probably enough to fill an episode, so let me know if you're interested. Number 3, we're gun nuts. Yeah, well, so everyone knows about the NRA, the National Rifle Association. It is a very powerful organization that has essentially made it their life's mission to make sure we don't develop any type of sensible gun laws or to fix laws we already have. At least that's how they're perceived. I'm saying alleged here because I don't want them coming after me. I mean, it's interesting because in a country of over 327 million people, the NRA only has 5 million members. They're loud, and they're the ones that spend the most amount of money to make sure essentially things stay as they are in the States. So I wouldn't say that we as a whole are gun nuts. It is a super, super polarizing topic across the country in both directions. Like complete ban to we need to allow everybody the right to bear arms. It isn't. It's Americans. We go big or go home. We're at the extremes. There's there's a middle ground, of course, but you don't hear that. It's always a minority that's the loudest. And so in order, labeling all of the citizens as strictly one or the other, obviously with this big of a population is naive. But the majority do believe in sensible gun laws and education. The actual opinion on gun ownership will vary greatly depending on if you're in a blue state or a red state. I could probably do another video on this. I can interview my dad, for example, who's a gun owner, but he's also he was in the military. So I don't know. I've always felt that he's had a very healthy view of guns and gun ownership. So if you were wanting to know a very American take, I can ask him. I'm sure he'd want to talk about it. So let me know on that. Number 4, we don't walk places / we are too lazy. So I think this is sort of a chicken or egg scenario, like what came first. We don't really have an infrastructure that supports walking culture unless you're in a city like New York or Chicago that has done that and also made public transportation cheap in order to keep it available for everyone. Like in Indianapolis, unless you're like in downtown Indianapolis, the rest of the city doesn't really have sidewalks for people to walk on. And the cities and towns are developed in a way that they're so spread out that you have to have a car. And to be fair, where I live here in Germany, you also have to have a car. We don't really have public transportation out here. Like, we have a bus that travels through our village like twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. So, I mean, at the same time though, like the villages are so much closer together, and my husband and I have definitely walked home after parties, because we're only talking about like walking a mile or two. So that's like nothing. There are paths here also out here in the country that are technically for farm equipment, but people do use them for walks and bike rides, and it keeps them off the street. So even if it wasn't necessarily intentional, it still promotes walking culture in terms of infrastructure better than the States, because, you know, they're safer places. My brother-in-law in the States, who's a teacher and also a cop, he bike rides to work pretty much every day. I say pretty much because I'm not entirely sure, like, if he only does it when the weather is good, or he really does do it every day. Either way, he is a very avid bike rider, and like it literally gives my sister a heart attack almost every day because he has to go on the main road, and American drivers aren't necessarily nice to cyclists. So on the other hand, my husband and I have ridden our bikes to work, and we take these back paths. We've never encountered any cars. Like, maybe a few times we have to actually cross the main streets, but like, that's it. You know, we're very safe. And also, like, back to the States, there are places, of course, you can hike, you know, like parks and whatnot, but in the end, you still have to drive to get there, you know? Like, it's not like here where I can just walk out my door and go for a walk. But also, to be fair, compared to other European countries, the car lobby in Germany is also super strong because they want Germans to buy cars. I mean, still technically kind of better than the States, but you know what I mean, right? All right, number 5, super religious. Yeah, I mean, some of the first Europeans who came to what is now the U.S. came to escape religious persecution. So religious freedom is definitely one of the benchmarks of this country, my country's history. It does play a big role. I do agree, compared to what I have seen in Germany, the U.S. is super religious in comparison. The things we will fight about in the States for religious reasons are things that aren't in Germany, mostly in terms of the rights of those in the LGBTQIA plus community. However, compared to Peruvians, I didn't really see much of a difference. That's relative. The majority of Peruvians are staunch Catholics, but it is a type of Catholicism that is also deeply rooted in Peruvian paganism. So like the Incan Empire, there's a lot of stuff that's carried over. So it's not uncommon to go into a Peruvian home and see an image of the Virgin Mary, as well as seeing a painting of one of the archangels with a very super stylized frame and artwork that is very specific to Peru. I love that kind of artwork. I actually really want one of those for my house, but I have a feeling my husband won't be too keen because it'll be like too religious. But he's also not even Catholic, so like it doesn't really have the same meaning for him anyway. But the US version of Christianity, including Catholicism, is super religious also in the way that it monetizes it. Churches don't pay taxes in the States, so those who have figured out how to make money off of people's relationship with both God and Christ are making literal bank. This was something my mom criticized a lot when I was growing up, because like in Peru you have these 500-year-old churches that are literally held together by duct tape and faith because it's such a poor country and you give whatever you can. While the Catholic Church I grew up in Indiana, where I had my first communion and confirmation, I was baptized in Peru, essentially kicked my mom out because she didn't give them enough money. And also the fact that I have to pay a church tax here in Germany is something I also have a serious problem with, especially because my husband has to pay a portion of my Catholic church tax, and he's not Catholic. I mean, I'm happy to give money to the church, but it has to be on my terms and what I can give. Like, this is definitely the Peruvian side of me coming out. Like, they have problems with both countries in this respect. Number 6, completely ignorant about what happens outside the U.S. Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm like, so if you want to talk about things like your local news stations on TV, we're getting better. But yeah, the local stuff is very like specific. And I know as a whole, especially ironically with my more liberal leaning friends, I know they're a lot more aware of world news because I've been getting a lot of messages from friends and family this week because it is all over the news in the States that Germany is literally underwater. So they all wanted to know how I was doing. I mean, with the age of the internet and the ease of all this information at our fingertips, there is no reason not to educate yourself about what's going on in the world, around the world. In terms of actual like news, like newspapers or whatever, it does depend on what you're subscribed to. So I follow the Indianapolis Star, which is a newspaper from my hometown, and of course it's very indie centric, and the only other news story it's covering at the moment that's not Indiana is the Larry Nassar scandal. He's the doctor for the U.S. gymnastics team that was molesting the athletes. That story first broke out in the U.S. because of the Indianapolis Star, so it's not surprising that they're still following it. On the other hand, I also subscribe to New York Times, and I get emails from them every day, and they have a whole section on world news. So I feel like nowadays it's a choice. It's a choice, and there are plenty of Americans who do choose to not educate themselves on world news. I realized very quickly when I was in college back in the 1970s that U.S. news was rather U.S.-centric. So I had, at that point, was starting to watch like BBC and even Al Jazeera. And I even now watch a lot of DW news, even through YouTube, because I find their journalism quite good. At least they're like the topics that they cover are interesting. On the other hand, when I do watch the news in Germany, you do hear what's going on in other European countries, something about the States. And I feel like it does sound like it's more, just because one European country is the size of one U.S. state. So it's easier to cover countries like the U.S. news covers what's going on in different states. But I feel like even in Europe, you still have to search more to get news outside of these bubbles. Like, for example, did you know Peru had its presidential elections last month? If you didn't, and you know a Peruvian, you should really check on them. The results were not good. People are freaking out. There's talk in my family about either leaving the country entirely or at least moving their money out. Like, this is so Peru is obviously a very specific example, but as a whole, in either US or Europe, you don't really hear much about South America so much. For example, like I said, like you do hear a little bit more about world news while in Europe, but I don't see it so much more to really boast about. But then again, because I come from a country that's like, I don't really come, my mom comes from a country that's, you don't hear much about the news because, maybe because they're not rich enough to warrant attention. I don't know. I have no idea. But there are other countries out there as well that still don't, make world news. All right. Number 7. I don't even know if I've been numbering these. Whatever. Number 7 is fake. Americans are fake. This is such a hot button issue for me, especially because I was raised like this whole, if you can't say anything nice, then don't say anything at all, as well as treat people the way you want to be treated. So much of my behavior is based on these two mantras, and I try to be as genuine as possible. So when people call me fake, or more specifically Americans fake, it feels like a slap in the face, and it makes me wonder, like, who hurt you? Who hurt you to make you so skeptical? Of course, my reaction to all that is just to, remain nice, because that's who I am and that's how I was raised. Kill them with kindness. It's another mantra I try to follow. And eventually, you will like me, because I'm a freaking delight. I'm a ray of freaking sunshine. Anyway, I do get where the stereotype comes from. Those of us who grow up in this in-your-face brand of American niceness, we are aware that there are a lot of fake folks out there, and when you are around it long enough, you do see enough of the nuance to get a feel of who's fake and who's not. On the other hand, if you're not used to it all, it just all feels fake. I have mentioned in earlier videos that I think the stereotype just comes from a place of ignorance. And the best example I can come up with is the person who first told me to my face during a work meeting that they thought Americans were fake. This person had lived in the States for a number of years, like 5-7 years, but the only real interactions they'd had with Americans was at work, where they aren't going to get the most authentic interactions, to be honest, because, we have like our professional face. They did travel extensively throughout the US, but only with other Germans. So like, I've never really seen this person try to actually integrate into the US, and probably because they knew they weren't staying permanently, so they didn't really feel like it was worth the effort. I don't know. But the Germans I know who don't think that Americans are fake are the ones who did actually try to reach out and get to know Americans and kind of like understand this language barrier is what it comes down to. And I mean, there are fake Americans, of course. I'm not going to deny that fact. You'll find that kind of fakeness anywhere. But most are genuine because that is how we are raised, and we just don't understand what you can gain by being a dick to a person. Why not be nice? Also, quick shout out to that one dude who commented on my YouTube channel a while back that saying that Americans are fake and that we're only nice because if not, you'll get shot. I mean, correlation does not imply causation, folks, but it is interesting where this person's mind went. And unfortunately, I can't find that comment because it is buried in my channel somewhere, but I did have to bring it up because it made me laugh. And last, but certainly not least, the obsession with heritage. Oh, yes. Yes, we're big on this. I also know it's very weird with Germans because they don't do this. Because the last time they did, there was a war and the whole world got involved. That's what we would call a bad look. So, and obviously you are looking at a perfect example of the stereotype. I identify as Peruvian American. Do I have Peruvian citizenship? No. But there is a bureaucratic story behind it. So let me explain. So in order for a Peruvian parent to claim their child as a Peruvian citizen, all they have to do is take their Peruvian ID, their DNI, and their child's birth certificate to the local Peruvian consulate or embassy and claim your kid. The issue was that my mom had a problem with her DNI. I'm not going to go into details, but the consulate actually needed both of my parents to be present at the nearest consulate, which for us is in Chicago. It's a 3-hour drive. And anyone who has had to work with embassies and consulates knows you have to plan pretty far into the future for these appointments. And my dad had the kind of job where he just wasn't home. He was traveling 80 to 90% of the year, and we literally couldn't plan anything with him, period. So fixing my mom's ID seemed impossible until we had a new consulate who was actually willing to work with us and ignore the fact that my dad had to physically be there. But by then it was a month after my 18th birthday. You see, once you're 18, your parent can't claim you because apparently your blood expires. Not their words, but that's just what it feels like. I had gone to the Ministry of the Interior, the Exterior, and the Foreign Ministry in Lima to try and find a loophole. Because, like, my mom, for example, is currently working on getting her Italian citizenship because her dad was born in Sori, Italy. He's been dead since 1985. My mom is still alive and kicking, and I cannot claim citizenship. The saddest thing was that every department I went to in order to plead my case, they looked at me like I grew a second head. One of them even asked, ¿Por qué ella quiere ser una ciudadana de ese país de mierda? Apparently, because I'm a United Statesian, I don't need Peruvian citizenship. But it's not about need. I want it. You see, yeah, I identify as Peruvian American, and it's so much more than just my mom's Peruvian and my dad is American. When I was a kid and I was learning to read and write in English in school, I would come home where my mom was waiting with a copy of Coquito, so I would also learn how to read and write in Spanish. My mom is a member of the Peruvian Association of Central Indiana, and we spend every July 28th with them, which is Peruvian Independence Day, by the way, as well as the Christmas Gala with the association. Some of my closest friends are also half Peruvian because of our ties with the association. I was sent to Peru for several summers by myself to work on my Spanish, where I went to school with my cousins and I developed my own relationship with my relatives. And I haven't even covered the food. Like, my mom did her freaking best to bring as much Peruvianness into my life as possible. And it is very much a part of my identity because I was raised with literally a foot in each culture. And honestly, it wasn't like an exact realization that this was my life. It was something I kind of realized as I got older and hung out with like my full American friends and realized the difference in our upbringing. And like, for example, if I watch episodes from like German Girl in America who talk about like, this is what Americans do, or this is what they do. And I would get this weird knee-jerk reaction and say, no, I didn't experience that. And then I have to think about like my American friends and remember, oh yeah, no, she's right. I do remember them doing that. So, I mean, I will say, like, my experiences growing up are more similar to those who just have a parent from another country. It's very different when you have, like, an immigrant parent versus, you know, like, a local. But I think this heritage obsession is because we are this melting pot of cultures. And when you first come to the States from another country, or just if you move to another country in general, you do try to cling to your culture and pass it on to your children. The thing is, though, with each subsequent generation, there's like much more like a disconnect from the original culture and much more like more integration into the newer country. And I don't necessarily think we, the US, understand how much culture isn't really something genetic. It is something you experience. Like, I say, and that I identify as Peruvian American, but I wouldn't consider my children that, especially because where I live, there are no other Peruvians besides myself. I will do my best to expose them to Peruvian culture and make sure they also learn Spanish, because I have relatives who don't speak English and definitely don't speak Spanish. But it won't be the same because I don't have the same resources as my mom had that allowed me to experience Peruvian culture in the way that I did. So, you know, it's more than just like genetics. It's the experience. But it is very common to hear Americans talk about identifying with a certain culture based on a distant relative. And a lot of times it's like a grandparent, especially where I live in the Midwest. You hear a lot of people talk about their German grandparent. It's very common. So what do you think? What other stereotypes are you aware of? I had a good time looking up this list, and I think it's fascinating to see how other countries see us. I think it's because it causes some self-reflection, and that can be a good thing. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and give this video a thumbs up. It lets me and YouTube know you like this kind of content and you want to see more. Please leave me a comment if you have any questions or if there's a certain topic you'd like to see on this channel. If you want fun escapism, my space fantasy The God Queen and its sequel The Last Imperator are available in ebook, paperback, and hardback. I have all the links in the description below. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get a free short story as well as some behind-the-scenes goodies. And don't forget to connect with me on social media, whether it is through Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. And that's it. Until next time, adi!